My name is Jan Mitchell, and at 68 years old, I never imagined my only son Bradley would betray me over the country house his father and I built together. That Memorial Day weekend, I drove up to find Sophia and her family unloading furniture. When I asked what was happening, Bradley stepped forward with cold eyes. "It is theirs now. You have no rights to go there," he declared as if I were a stranger. I just nodded and smiled, which confused them all. They had no idea what awaited when they tried moving in. I would like to know where you are watching this from. If my story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happened when they realized their plan had backfired. The Vermont country house was not just a vacation property. It represented 35 years of love dreams and hard work. Frank and I purchased the 5 acres of wooded land nestled near a small lake back in 1990 when we were young and full of ambition but short on money. "We can build it ourselves," Frank had said, his blue eyes twinkling with that determination I fell in love with. "It will take time, but it will be ours in a way nothing else could be." And build it we did. Frank was a gifted carpenter who worked construction during the week, and I taught elementary school. Every weekend and throughout summers, we drove 3 hours from our small apartment in Boston to work on our dream. Frank designed and built every cabinet, every door frame, every window seat. I still remember his hands strong and sure, measuring twice, before cutting once, a philosophy he applied to life as well as woodworking. "This house is our legacy, Janie," he would say, as we worked side by side. I focused on the interior design, choosing warm colors that complemented the natural wood and stone elements Frank incorporated. The large stone fireplace in the living room took us an entire summer to complete with rocks we collected ourselves from the property. Bradley was born 3 years after we started building. He literally grew up alongside the house, toddling around with his toy hammer helping his daddy. As a little boy, he spent every summer at the lake, learning to fish off our dock and hiking the surrounding trails with Frank. Those were golden days, filled with laughter and possibilities. We finally completed the main structure when Bradley was 7, though Frank always said a house is never truly finished. He continued adding special touches until the day he fell ill. The wraparound porch with its handcrafted rocking chairs, the reading nook in the upstairs hallway, the treehouse that Bradley declared was his man cave when he turned 13. Frank was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when Bradley was in college. It moved quickly, as that terrible disease often does. Within 6 months, I lost my partner of 37 years. The doctors said he fought harder than most, but I knew he was hanging on through that last summer to see the garden bloom one more time, to sit on the porch and watch the sunset over our lake. After Frank passed, the country house became even more precious to me. It was where I felt closest to him, surrounded by the work of his hands, the dreams we had built together. I retired from teaching the following year and made the country house my permanent residence. The memories were sometimes painful, but mostly comforting. I could almost hear Frank whistling in the workshop or smell his coffee brewing early in the morning. Bradley graduated from Boston University with a business degree 2 years after his father died. He met Sophia during his senior year when they were paired for a marketing project. She was beautiful, intelligent, and came from what appeared to be a wealthy family. When Bradley first brought her to the country house, I was hopeful. She complimented the property and seemed genuinely interested in the stories of how Frank and I built it ourselves. "Your home has such character, Jan," she said, running her hand along the kitchen counter Frank had crafted from a single slab of maple. "You just cannot buy this kind of craftsmanship anymore." I noticed her appraising glance as she took in the view of the lake, but thought nothing of it at the time. I was simply happy that my son had found someone who appeared to appreciate what we had created. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged. Bradley insisted they hold the wedding at the country house, which touched me deeply. It seemed like a connection to his father, a way of having Frank present on his important day. The wedding was picture perfect. We strung lights in the old oak trees, set up a tent on the lawn, and watched as Bradley and Sophia exchanged vows with the lake sparkling behind them. 200 guests, mostly from Sophia's side, filled our property. Her parents, Harold and Gwendolyn Blackwell, were impeccably dressed and polite, though something about their demeanor made me slightly uncomfortable. They moved through my home with an air of evaluation, rather than appreciation. "What a charming rustic retreat," Gwendolyn said in a tone that suggested rustic was not entirely a compliment. "We have a summer home in the Hamptons, of course, but there is something so refreshingly simple about this place." Harold was less subtle, Prime lakefront property like this must be worth a pretty penny now, he remarked, peering out at the water. If you ever consider selling, I know several developers who would be interested. I laughed it off. This house will never be for sale. It is staying in the family. Of course, he replied with a smile that did not reach his eyes. And now that includes our Sophia. That should have been my first warning, but I was too caught up in Bradley's happiness to pay attention. When I overheard Sophia telling a bridesmaid, "When this place is ours someday, the first thing to go will be those awful kitchen cabinets," I dismissed it as wedding day excitement and talk of a distant future. Bradley and Sophia settled in a luxury apartment in Boston after their honeymoon. He worked for a financial services firm, and she took a job with a high-end marketing agency. They appeared to be doing well, though their lifestyle seemed lavish for young professionals just starting out. Designer clothes, a brand new luxury SUV, expensive restaurants several times a week. I worried slightly, but told myself they were adults and knew what they were doing. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming. The signs were there, hidden beneath warm smiles and kisses on my cheek. But when you love someone, you often see what you want to see. And I loved my son more than anything in this world. About a year after the wedding, the first cracks began to appear in my relationship with Bradley and Sophia. They had been living beyond their means despite their good jobs, and financial pressure was mounting. I noticed Bradley becoming tense during our weekly phone calls, changing the subject whenever I asked about work or their plans for the future. One Sunday afternoon, he called with an unusual request. "Mom, Sophia's family is having a reunion next month, and they need a place to host everyone. Would it be okay if we use the country house? It would just be for a long weekend." I hesitated. The house was my sanctuary, filled with irreplaceable mementos of my life with Frank, but I wanted to support my son, and this seemed like a reasonable request. "Of course, sweetie. Just please make sure everyone is careful with the place. You know how much everything there means to me." "Thanks, Mom. You are the best. We will take great care of everything, I promise." When I returned to the house after the Blackwell family reunion, my heart sank. While nothing was damaged beyond repair, it was clear the property had not been treated with respect. Empty wine bottles filled 3 recycling bins. Cigarette butts littered the porch despite my no-smoking rule. Worst of all, several of Frank's handcrafted items were missing, including a small oak jewelry box he had made for me on our 25th anniversary and a set of carved wooden coasters that had always sat on the coffee table. I called Bradley immediately. "Oh, those things," he said dismissively when I mentioned the missing items. "Sophia thought they were just old stuff you would not miss. Her mother really admired that little box, so Sophia gave it to her as a thank you gift for helping with the reunion expenses." "Bradley, that box was special. Your father made it for me. I want it back." "Mom, do not make this into a big deal. It is just a box. We cannot ask for it back now. That would be so rude." I was stunned by his attitude. The Bradley I raised would never have been so callous about something he knew was precious to me. It was the first time I felt like I was talking to a stranger wearing my son's face. The incident created tension between us, but I tried to move past it for the sake of our relationship. When Bradley and Sophia invited me to their apartment for Thanksgiving that year, I accepted, hoping to rebuild our connection. Sophia's parents were also there, and throughout dinner Sophia made passive-aggressive comments about the country house. "The kitchen in that place is so outdated. Those wooden cabinets make it look like a cabin from the 1970s, she remarked while serving dessert. "Frank made those cabinets by hand," I replied quietly. "Well, handmade does not always mean well made," Gwendolyn chimed in with a tight smile. "When you renovate, you should consider some of those lovely Italian imports we saw in Architectural Digest." Bradley said nothing to defend his father's craftsmanship. He simply poured more wine and changed the subject. It was as if the house was already theirs in his mind, a property to be remodeled, rather than a home filled with history and love. As the months passed, Bradley became increasingly distant. Our weekly calls dwindled to monthly, then to occasional texts. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, impatient to end the conversation. I tried reaching out more, inviting him and Sophia to visit, but there was always an excuse. Work was too busy. They had plans with Sophia's family. They were looking at investment properties and had no time. Then came the Christmas dinner where everything changed. I drove into Boston through a snowstorm to join them at their apartment, bringing gifts and Frank's special eggnog recipe that Bradley had always loved. Sophia's parents were there again, dominating the conversation with stories of their latest European vacation. After dinner, Bradley cleared his throat and took Sophia's hand. "We have an announcement to make," he said, beaming. "We are expecting a baby in June." My heart soared. A grandchild. Despite our recent difficulties, this felt like a new beginning, a chance to heal whatever rift had formed between us. "That is wonderful news," I exclaimed, tears in my eyes. "Your father would be so proud." "Thanks, Mom," Bradley said, then hesitated, exchanging glances with Sophia. "This actually makes some of our other plans more urgent. With a baby coming, we need to think about the future." Of course, I agreed, thinking he meant their apartment might be too small, or they needed to consider schools. "What Bradley is trying to say," Harold interjected smoothly, "is that with a growing family they need to consider their assets and inheritance planning." Something in his tone made me uneasy. I noticed Bradley and Sophia whispering with her parents when they thought I was not looking, and caught phrases like "perfect timing" and "she will understand now." On the drive home that night, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The excitement of becoming a grandmother was tempered by the feeling that something was happening behind my back, something involving my home and possibly my son's loyalty. The next month, I tried to discuss my concerns with Bradley directly. "Is everything okay between us? You seem distant lately." "You are imagining things, Mom," he said with irritation. "I am just busy with work and preparing for the baby. Not everything is about you." His words stung, especially since I had barely seen him in months. It felt like gaslighting, making me question my own perceptions. The son who once called me his best friend now treated me like an inconvenience, an obstacle to something he wanted. As my isolation grew, so did my worry. Bradley had always been honest to a fault, a quality Frank and I had instilled in him from childhood. What had changed him so dramatically? The answer I was beginning to suspect had expensive taste and influential parents who saw my family home as nothing more than an undervalued asset. Little Lily entered the world on a warm June morning. A beautiful baby with Bradley's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair like Sophia's. The moment I held my granddaughter, a surge of love washed over me, temporarily pushing aside the worries that had been growing for months. This tiny person connected us all, a new branch on our family tree. "She is perfect," I whispered gently, stroking her cheek. "She is," Sophia agreed, watching me carefully from her hospital bed. "Mom and Dad are flying in tomorrow to meet her. They have already set up a college fund." I had brought a special gift, a small quilt. I had sewn myself, incorporating scraps from Bradley's baby blanket and a shirt that had belonged to Frank. Something to keep her connected to her heritage, I explained as I presented it. Sophia accepted it with a tight smile. How thoughtful. "We will add it to the nursery decor." In the weeks that followed, I discovered that becoming a grandmother did not automatically grant me the access to Lily's life that I had anticipated. Whenever I called to arrange a visit, there seemed to be an obstacle. Lily was napping. Sophia's parents were visiting. They had a photographer coming for professional baby portraits. When I was permitted to visit, Gwendolyn was often already there, ensconced in the nursery, as if it were her domain. She spoke about Lily in possessive terms, referencing our baby and making plans for her future that never seemed to include me. "We are thinking Lily might summer with us in the Hamptons when she is a bit older," Gwendolyn announced during one of my visits. "The social connections she will make there will be invaluable for her future." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that confrontation would only make things worse. But inside, I mourned the loss of what I had imagined summers with Lily at the country house, teaching her to swim in the lake, just as Frank had taught Bradley. 3 months after Lily's birth, Bradley called to invite me to dinner at Lucille, one of the most expensive restaurants in Boston. "Just you and me, Mom. We need to talk about some things." Hope fluttered in my chest. Perhaps he had recognized the distance between us and wanted to make amends. I wore my best dress and arrived early, heart pounding with anticipation. Bradley arrived 20 minutes late, already checking his phone as he sat down. After cursory questions about my health and life, he ordered an expensive bottle of wine and leaned forward. "Mom, I have been thinking a lot about the future lately. Having Lily has made me realize how important family legacy island—" "I completely agree," I said warmly, thinking we were finally connecting again. The thing is, he continued, swirling his wine glass, Sophia and I are planning for Lily's future, and we need to make some practical arrangements. We were hoping you would consider signing over the country house to us now, rather than waiting for it to pass through your estate. The request hit me like a physical blow. Sign over the house, the home Frank and I had built with our own hands, the only place I truly felt his presence still. Bradley, that house is my home. I live there full-time now. He waved his hand dismissively. You could move into a nice condo closer to us. It would be more practical at your age anyway. The house needs a lot of updating, and we would make sure it is ready for Lily to grow up enjoying it. Updating, I echoed, thinking of Frank's lovingly crafted details they planned to demolish. That house is filled with your father's handiwork. It is his legacy, as much as it is a piece of property. Bradley's expression hardened. Dad has been gone for 7 years, Mom. It is just a house now, and frankly, it is outdated. Sophia's parents have offered to help us renovate it into something really special. We could keep the land and views, but make the house itself more modern. The answer is no, Bradley. I am sorry, but I cannot do that. His face flushed with anger. This is not just about you, Mom. This is about what is best for our family going forward. Do you really want to be the one holding everyone back because you cannot let go of the past? The past is not what I am holding on to, I replied, my voice shaking slightly. It is my present. That house is my home. Bradley signaled for the check, his jaw tight. I thought you would be reasonable about this. Sophia said you would put yourself first, but I defended you. I guess she was right. The accusation was so twisted it left me speechless. Somehow my unwillingness to give up my home had been transformed into selfishness. We parted that night with a chasm between us that felt unbridgeable. 2 weeks later, Harold and Gwendolyn requested a meeting with me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between Boston and my country home. Harold began with the practiced smoothness of the investment banker he was. We understand your reluctance to part with the property. Sentimental attachments can be powerful. Which is why we would like to offer you compensation, Gwendolyn added. A fair market value payment that would allow you to purchase a lovely condo in a retirement community. We know of several with excellent amenities. I am 68, I replied coolly. I am not ready for a retirement community, and my house is not for sale at any price. Harold's smile tightened. Bradley and Sophia have their hearts set on giving Lily the childhood she deserves in that lovely location. We have already consulted with architects about the renovations needed to bring the property up to modern standards. My blood ran cold. You have been planning renovations for a house that is not yours. Just preliminary discussions, Gwendolyn said smoothly. The current structure would need to be largely replaced, of course. Those handmade elements are charming but not up to code. We envision something more substantial, with proper guest quarters, for when we visit. The answer is no, I said, firmly gathering my purse and standing. Please respect my decision and my property. Harold's mask of politeness slipped. You are making a mistake, January. Bradley is quite upset about your stubbornness. Family relationships can be so fragile. Would you really risk losing your son and granddaughter over a pile of old wood? The threat was thinly veiled, but unmistakable. My hands trembled as I left the cafe, but my resolve remained firm. What they were asking was not just about property. It was about erasing Frank's legacy, about taking advantage of me, about treating me as if I were already irrelevant. My worst fears were confirmed a week later when a neighbor called. Jan, I thought you should know there have been people at your house. Men in suits walking the property taking measurements. One of them mentioned something about demolition permits. I drove to the country house immediately and found business cards from a high-end construction company tucked into my doorframe. When I called Bradley furious, he was unapologetic. We are just getting estimates, Mom. You will come around eventually, and we want to be ready. That night, I changed all the locks and security codes on the property. I was not naive enough to think this would stop them for long, but it sent a clear message. The next day, Bradley called enraged. What the hell, Mom? We drove all the way up there with the contractors and could not get in. It is my house, Bradley. I did not authorize any contractors or give permission for anyone to enter. This is ridiculous. You are acting like a crazy old woman. Maybe we need to talk about having someone make these decisions for you if you cannot make rational choices anymore." The threat chilled me to the bone. I had read enough stories about elderly parents being declared incompetent by money-hungry children. After hanging up, I sat on Frank's old rocking chair on the porch and cried for the first time since this nightmare began. What had happened to our son, the boy who once helped his father sand the very floorboards beneath my feet, now wanted to tear it all down for profit and status. That evening, I called my oldest friend Elaine, who had known Bradley since he was born. "I barely recognize him anymore, Elaine. It is like Sophia and her family have completely changed him." "Or maybe they just brought out something that was always there," she suggested gently. "People show their true colors when money and property are involved." "What should I do?" "Talk to a lawyer, January. A good one. This is not just about a house anymore. This is about protecting yourself." Her words echoed in my mind as I looked around at the home Frank and I had created together. I could almost hear his voice in the creaking of the old porch swing. "Protect what we built, Janie. Do not let anyone take it from you." I fell asleep that night with tears on my cheeks, but determination in my heart. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same strength Frank had always believed I possessed. Memorial Day weekend had always been special at the country house. Frank and I traditionally opened the summer season by hosting a barbecue for neighbors and friends, planting the vegetable garden, and taking the first swim of the year in the lake. After his passing, I continued the tradition alone, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms. This particular Memorial Day, I drove up from Boston, where I had been visiting a college friend. As I rounded the final curve in the driveway, my heart stopped. 3 unfamiliar luxury SUVs were parked haphazardly on the lawn. A moving truck stood open near the porch with men carrying furniture inside. Expensive-looking furniture that was definitely not mine. I parked and stepped out, legs shaking. Sophia emerged from the front door directing movers who carried what appeared to be an antique dining table. She froze when she saw me. "Jan, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Bradley appeared, followed by Harold and Gwendolyn. Their expressions ranged from surprise to smug satisfaction. "Mom," Bradley said, stepping forward. "We did not expect you today." "Clearly," I replied, watching as more furniture was unloaded. "Would someone like to explain what is happening at my house?" Bradley exchanged glances with Sophia, then squared his shoulders. "This is not your house anymore, Mom. It is ours now. Or more specifically, it belongs to Sophia's parents." "What are you talking about? I never sold this house." "You did not have to," Harold interjected smoothly. "Bradley handled the paperwork as your power of attorney. Everything is completely legal." "My power of attorney?" I echoed in disbelief. "I never gave Bradley power of attorney." "You signed the documents last fall," Bradley insisted. "Remember, when you were sick with pneumonia, I brought papers for you to sign so I could handle your medical decisions." I had been hospitalized briefly with pneumonia the previous year, but I had signed no such documents. The realization of what they had done hit me with stunning clarity. They had forged my signature or tricked me when I was medicated. Either way, it was fraud. Bradley stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do not make a scene, Mom. It is better this way. You cannot maintain this property alone. We are doing you a favor." "A favor," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Sophia said, joining us. "And you can still visit occasionally, with advance notice, of course." Advance notice. To visit my own home. "It is not your home anymore," Bradley said, coldly, his expression hardening. "It is theirs now. You have no rights to go there." 7 simple words that revealed the complete betrayal of my only child. In that moment, looking into his eyes, I saw no trace of the boy Frank and I had raised. No hint of remorse or doubt. Just cold determination, and the influence of the greedy people standing behind him. I could have screamed. I could have collapsed in grief. I could have created the scene Bradley feared. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. I nodded slowly and smiled, which clearly confused them all. "I see," I said quietly. My unexpected reaction seemed to unnerve Bradley more than anger would have. He shifted uncomfortably. "So you understand. You will go peacefully." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied, my smile never wavering. Harold stepped forward, already discussing their plans, as if I were no longer present. We will need to begin demolition next week. The contractor believes we can salvage some of the stone for decorative elements, but the wooden structure will need to be completely replaced. The wooden structure my husband built with his own hands, I said, my voice even. Well, yes, Gwendolyn replied, with feigned sympathy. Charming as it was, it is hardly suitable for a modern family home. We are thinking 5 bedrooms each with ensuite bathrooms, a professional kitchen, and a proper boathouse. As they continued detailing how they would destroy every trace of Frank's craftsmanship, I quietly took out my phone and began taking photos. The moving trucks, the furniture being unloaded, Harold directing workers, Sophia pointing out where her mother's antiques should be placed, evidence of their trespassing and theft. "What are you doing?" Sophia demanded when she noticed. "Just capturing memories," I replied, calmly continuing to take photos. Bradley grabbed my arm. "Stop that. You are being difficult." I gently removed his hand. "No, son. I am being smart." Something in my tone must have worried him because he pulled Sophia aside for a hurried conversation. I heard her hiss, "Just make her leave," as I walked back to my car. I drove away with their eyes on my back, forcing myself to maintain a normal speed despite the overwhelming urge to flee. Only when I was well out of sight did I pull over hands, shaking too badly to continue. Tears came then, hot and bitter, for everything I had lost. Not just my home, but my son. The final connection to Frank. The future I had imagined with my granddaughter. The drive home to my small apartment in town was a blur of memories. Frank and I laying the foundation stones. Bradley as a child helping to paint his bedroom blue like the sky. Family Christmases around the fireplace. The garden where Frank's ashes were scattered now, slated for destruction to make way for a proper boathouse. When I arrived home, another shock awaited me. Sorting through a pile of mail, I discovered several important letters had been opened and resealed. Bank statements, property tax notices, legal correspondence. Somehow my mail had been intercepted, read, and then delivered as if nothing were amiss. With trembling fingers, I called my bank and discovered that someone claiming to be me had requested address changes on several accounts. The representative cheerfully informed me that my son had handled everything as my authorized representative. "But I never authorized him," I protested. "We have the power of attorney on file, Mrs. Mitchell. Would you like us to email you a copy?" When the document arrived in my inbox, I stared at my supposed signature in disbelief. It was a decent forgery, but definitely not my handwriting. I had never signed this paper giving Bradley sweeping powers over my financial and legal affairs. Yet here it was notarized and official-looking, dated during my hospital stay for pneumonia. The piece finally slid into place as I remembered Bradley bringing a stack of insurance forms to the hospital, holding them, while I signed, flipping pages quickly and pointing where I should sign next. I had been foggy from medication, trusting my son implicitly. Why would I have questioned what he placed before me? In that moment of clarity, as I stared at the fraudulent document, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock receded, replaced by a cold, clear determination. This was not just about a house anymore. This was about justice. About standing up for myself and for Frank's memory. About not allowing greed and deception to win. I thought of Frank's favorite saying whenever we faced a construction challenge with the house. "When you hit bedrock, you do not give up. You find another way forward." I had hit bedrock. Now it was time to find another way forward. The next morning I called the most respected elder law attorney in the county, Margaret Wilson. Her firm specialized in protecting senior citizens from financial exploitation, including cases involving family members. When I explained my situation, she immediately scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Margaret's office was warm and inviting, much like the woman herself. In her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes, she listened intently as I detailed everything that had happened, taking careful notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Mitchell, what you are describing is not uncommon," she said when I finished. "Elder financial abuse is increasingly prevalent, and cases involving adult children are among the most difficult, both legally and emotionally." "Can they really take my house like this?" I asked, the question that had kept me awake all night. "Not if the power of attorney was fraudulently obtained, which appears to be the case here. That document would be invalid, making any property transfer executed under its authority equally invalid. She leaned forward. But we need to move quickly. The longer they occupy the property, the more complicated this becomes. Margaret outlined a multi-pronged strategy. First, we would file for an emergency injunction to prevent any demolition or major alterations to the property. Second, we would contest the validity of the power of attorney in any property transfers executed under it. Third, we would gather evidence of mail fraud, which was a federal offense. Finally, we would document everything to build an airtight case. What about Bradley? I asked, my heart aching, despite everything. Could he face criminal charges? Margaret's expression softened. That would depend on his level of involvement and knowledge. If he was a willing participant in forgery and fraud, then yes, there could be criminal implications. But that would be your decision whether to pursue. The thought of my son facing criminal charges was almost unbearable. Yet the alternative, allowing him and the Blackwells to steal my home and destroy Frank's legacy, was equally unthinkable. I need time to consider that aspect, I said finally. But I want to move forward with protecting my property immediately. Understood. One more thing, Jan, Margaret added, using my first name for the first time. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Sometimes these situations can escalate when the other party realizes you are fighting back. I had not considered that possibility. I have my apartment in town, but Bradley has a key. I would recommend changing those locks today. And perhaps staying with a friend for a while just as a precaution. My friend Elaine immediately offered her guest house when I called. Stay as long as you need, January. George and I are here for whatever you need. Over the next 2 weeks, we implemented Margaret's strategy methodically. I hired a locksmith to change the locks at my apartment and installed a simple security system. Margaret filed the emergency injunction, which was granted based on the suspicious circumstances of the property transfer. This legally prevented Bradley and the Blackwells from making any changes to the house while ownership was in dispute. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering evidence. I obtained affidavits from neighbors who had known Frank and me for decades, confirming my continuous ownership and occupation of the property. I found Frank's detailed journals documenting the construction of every aspect of the house, proving its personal and historical significance beyond mere market value. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. The notary whose stamp appeared on the fraudulent power of attorney had no record or recollection of notarizing such a document. When shown the paperwork, she confirmed the stamp was similar to hers but not identical, suggesting it was a forgery. Margaret also helped me secure an expert handwriting analysis, comparing the signature on the power of attorney with known examples of my authentic signature. The expert's conclusion was unequivocal. The power of attorney signature was not mine. As our case built, I learned more about the Blackwells' motivations through Margaret's investigator. Despite their appearance of wealth, Harold's investment firm had suffered significant losses in recent years. They were over-leveraged on their Hamptons property and facing potential foreclosure. The country house represented not just a status symbol, but a financial lifeline, a valuable property they could potentially borrow against. They are not just greedy, Margaret explained, reviewing the investigator's report. They are desperate. That makes them more dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes. One such mistake came when Bradley attempted to access my retirement accounts using the fraudulent power of attorney. The bank's fraud department flagged the transaction and contacted me directly for verification. This incident added another layer to our case and prompted Margaret to request a formal police investigation into financial exploitation. Through it all, I experienced a transformation from victim to advocate. The paralyzing grief that had initially consumed me gradually gave way to purposeful action. I reconnected with old friends who rallied around me with support and encouragement. I joined a support group for seniors facing similar situations and found strength in shared experiences. Elaine noticed the change in me one evening as we sat on her patio watching the sunset. You know, Jan, as horrible as this whole situation is, I have not seen you this alive since before Frank passed. What do you mean? You have purpose again. Fire. For a while after Frank died, it was like you were just going through the motions. Now you are fighting for something. She was right. In defending my home, I had rediscovered my voice and my strength. Frank had always said I was the backbone of our family, the one who could be counted on in a crisis. Somehow, in my grief over losing him and my desire to maintain peace with Bradley, I had forgotten that part of myself. As our legal case progressed, Bradley's communications became increasingly desperate and erratic. His text messages alternated between anger, "You are ruining everything with your stubbornness and manipulation. Lily misses her grandmother. Why are you doing this to her?" I saved every message as evidence but rarely responded. The turning point came 6 weeks after Memorial Day, when the court officially invalidated the fraudulent power of attorney. With that ruling, any actions taken under its authority, including the property transfer, were rendered null and void. Legally, the house had never stopped being mine. When Margaret called with the news, I wept with relief. "What happens now?" I asked when I could speak again. "Now we reclaim your property," she replied with satisfaction, "and decide how you want to proceed regarding potential criminal charges." I had given this question much thought during sleepless nights at Elaine's guest house. Part of me wanted justice punishment for the pain and betrayal Bradley and the Blackwells had inflicted. Another part, the mother who had held her newborn son and promised to love him unconditionally, recoiled at the thought of seeing him face legal consequences. In the end, I chose a middle path. "I want my house back and I want them held accountable," I told Margaret, "but I would prefer to avoid criminal charges against Bradley if possible. The Blackwells, however, I have no such reservations about." Margaret nodded. "We can approach it that way. The evidence suggests Harold was the primary architect of this scheme anyway. Bradley appears to have been a willing participant, but perhaps not the instigator." With our strategy set, we prepared for the final confrontation. The timing was crucial. Through my neighbors' reports, we knew the Blackwells were planning a grand housewarming party for the 4th of July weekend, inviting their wealthy friends to see their new lake estate. They had been living in the house intermittently while planning their extensive renovations, bringing in expensive furniture and artwork to replace my modest, meaningful possessions. It would be at this gathering, with maximum witnesses to their humiliation, that justice would finally be served. The morning of July 4th dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect summer day that showcases Vermont at its finest. From my vantage point parked on the public road overlooking the property, I could see the frantic preparations for the Blackwells' party. Catering vans came and went. Workers set up a large tent on the lawn. Florists arrived with elaborate arrangements. My neighbor Martha, who had been my eyes and ears throughout this ordeal, texted updates throughout the morning. "Moving company just delivered an enormous sectional sofa. Looks like it cost more than my car." And later, Sophia's parents are directing everything like generals. Bradley looks miserable. At precisely 2 o'clock, exactly as planned, I met Sheriff Davis and 2 deputies at the agreed location a quarter-mile from the house. Margaret was there as well, along with a court officer carrying the official documents, declaring the property transfer void, and authorizing law enforcement to remove trespassers. "Are you ready for this?" Mrs. Mitchell Sheriff Davis asked kindly. He had known Frank and me for years, having bought his own cabin on the lake around the same time we built our house. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied, smoothing down the simple blue dress I had chosen for the occasion. I wanted to look dignified, not vengeful, despite the circumstances. We drove in a small procession down the driveway, just as the first party guests were arriving. The contrast was almost comical. Sheriff Davis's official vehicle leading my modest sedan, followed by Margaret's car, and the court officer interrupting the parade of luxury vehicles disgorging expensively dressed guests. I stepped out of my car as Bradley emerged from the house, his face draining of color when he saw the official vehicles. Sophia appeared behind him wearing a designer sundress, her expression shifting from annoyance to alarm. "Mom, what is going on? Why are the police here?" Bradley's voice cracked slightly. Sheriff Davis stepped forward, official papers in hand. "Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Blackwell, I am here to execute a court order regarding this property." By now, Harold and Gwendolyn had appeared on the porch, along with several confused-looking guests. Harold rushed down the steps, blustering immediately. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" "We are hosting a private event." "You are hosting it on property that does not belong to you, Mr. Blackwell," Margaret stated clearly, her professional demeanor unwavering. "The court has ruled that the power of attorney used to transfer this property was fraudulently obtained and has invalidated all actions taken under its authority. This house legally belongs to Mrs. Jan Mitchell and has never ceased to be her property." Sophia let out a small gasp. Bradley's face flushed red. But it was Harold whose reaction was most dramatic. He took one look at the court documents. Sheriff Davis held out, then turned and bolted toward the back of the property. "Sir, stop." One of the deputies called, immediately pursuing him. The next few minutes were chaos. Gwendolyn began berating Sophia for letting this happen. Guests murmured in confusion, some discreetly returning to their cars. The caterers froze in place, unsure whether to continue setting up. And Bradley, my son, stood paralyzed in the middle of it all, looking like a child caught in a terrible lie. Harold did not get far. The deputy caught up with him near the boathouse, where he appeared to be attempting to dispose of a briefcase in the lake. This only added to his troubles, as the briefcase was found to contain multiple forged documents with my supposed signature, including financial paperwork for loans against the property. Inside the house, the evidence of their entitlement was everywhere. My personal belongings had been piled in boxes in the garage labeled "Donate" and "Trash." Family photos had been removed from walls to make way for expensive artwork. Frank's handcrafted furniture had been relegated to the basement, replaced by designer pieces that looked completely out of place in our rustic home. Most disturbing of all, architectural plans on the dining table detailed the complete demolition of the existing structure, with only the stone fireplace to be incorporated into their modern lake mansion. As Sheriff Davis explained the situation to the departing guests, Margaret took me aside. "You have a decision to make about pressing charges, January. The evidence of fraud is overwhelming. Harold's attempt to flee and dispose of evidence only strengthens the case." I looked across the lawn to where Bradley stood, arguing with Sophia, their perfect day and perfect plans in ruins. My son, Frank's son, a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, yet still my child. "I want to speak with Bradley alone before I decide," I said. Margaret nodded, understanding. "Take your time. We will make sure no one leaves with anything that is not theirs." I found Bradley sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his expression a complex mixture of shame, anger, and fear. "Was any of this your idea?" I asked, quietly sitting beside him but leaving space between us. "Or was it all Harold's plan?" He stared out at the lake for a long moment before answering. "It started with them. Harold found out I was having money problems. We made some bad investments and the lifestyle Sophia wanted. It was more than we could afford. He suggested I help you with your financial affairs, said at your age you should not be managing a property like this alone. And the forgery. The stolen mail." Bradley winced. Harold handled most of that, but I knew I did not stop it. He finally looked at me directly. "Are you going to press charges?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications for his future. A criminal record, possible disbarment from the financial industry. The shame of public exposure. "That depends," I said carefully. "I need to understand why Bradley, not Harold's reasons. Yours. Why would you do this to me, to your father's memory?" His face crumpled. "I do not know, Mom. It all happened so gradually. First it was just helping you with paperwork. Then Harold started talking about the value of the property, how it was being wasted as a single-family home when it could be developed. Sophia got excited about having a vacation place better than her college friends had. And somewhere along the way I started believing I deserved it somehow, that I was entitled to it. And what about what I deserved? After 35 years of building a life there with your father," tears spilled down his cheeks. "I did not think about that. I did not let myself think about it. Harold kept saying we would get you a nice condo, that you would be happier without the maintenance of this place. I convinced myself it was true." I could see the boy I raised somewhere in his remorseful expression, the child who would own up to breaking a window or taking an extra cookie. But I also saw the man who had betrayed me completely, who had been willing to destroy everything his father had built out of greed and weakness. "Here is what I am going to do," I said finally. "I will not press charges against you on several conditions. First, you get counseling to understand why you were willing to do this. Second, you cut ties with Harold and his corrupting influence. And third, you acknowledge fully and publicly what you did, including to your father's memory." Relief flooded his face. "Yes. Anything. Thank you, Mom." Do not thank me yet, I continued. This does not mean our relationship continues as before. Trust once broken is not easily repaired. It will take time for me to determine if any relationship with you is possible going forward. What about Lily? She is innocent in all this. Yes, she island, and I would like to know my granddaughter, but that will have to be negotiated carefully with boundaries that respect my property and my autonomy. As we talked, Sophia emerged from the house escorted by a deputy. She glared at me, then at Bradley. This is your fault, she spat at him. You should have handled your mother better. Now everything is ruined. Bradley stood to face her. No, Sophia. This is our fault. We tried to steal from my mother. We lied, forged documents, and planned to destroy my father's legacy. I will not be part of this anymore. Her expression shifted from anger to calculation. What are you saying? I am saying I want no part of your father's schemes or your materialistic dreams. I am saying I need to rediscover who I really am, because this person, he gestured to himself, this is not who my parents raised me to be. The transformation in my son in that moment was remarkable. For the first time in years, I glimpsed the Bradley that Frank and I had raised, a person with integrity and conscience. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but it gave me a glimmer of hope. The legal aftermath unfolded over the following days and weeks. Harold was arrested for fraud, forgery, and attempting to destroy evidence. Gwendolyn was charged as an accomplice. Sophia, upon learning of her family's true financial situation and facing the collapse of her carefully cultivated image, filed for separation from Bradley 3 days later. My home was legally reaffirmed as mine, though it would take time to undo the changes they had made and reclaim it fully as my own space again. Margaret helped me secure a restraining order against the Blackwells, ensuring they could never approach my property again. Throughout it all, I maintained my dignity and focus on justice rather than revenge. When reporters called asking for interviews about the socialite family fraud scheme, I declined. This was a private family tragedy, not entertainment for public consumption. The most difficult moment came when I finally returned to stay at my house again. Standing in the space that had been so violated, seeing the changes they had made, and the disrespect they had shown to Frank's craftsmanship, I felt the full weight of the betrayal. I spent that first night back on the porch swing looking out at the lake and talking to Frank as if he were beside me. I protected what we built, I told the stars. But I never imagined the threat would come from our own son. The year following what I came to think of as the invasion was one of profound healing and transformation. Reclaiming my house was only the beginning. I also needed to reclaim my sense of security and rebuild my understanding of family. The first step was restoring the house to its original state, removing the gaudy additions the Blackwells had installed and retrieving Frank's handcrafted furniture from the basement where it had been relegated. Each piece I returned to its proper place felt like a small victory, a reaffirmation of what truly mattered. I also made some changes of my own. I painted the kitchen a sunny yellow that I had always wanted but Frank had resisted. I created a reading nook in the upstairs hallway, something I had planned for years but never implemented. These alterations were not about erasing the past, but about acknowledging that this was my home now evolving as I evolved. The legal consequences played out, much as Margaret had predicted. Harold spent 6 months in jail for fraud and forgery, followed by 3 years of probation. Gwendolyn received probation and community service. Bradley, thanks to my decision not to press charges and his cooperation with authorities, received 2 years of probation and was required to complete financial ethics training. The question of my ongoing relationship with Bradley was more complicated than any legal judgment. We began with carefully structured meetings in neutral locations, sometimes with a family therapist present. Bradley seemed genuinely remorseful and committed to understanding why he had been susceptible to Harold's influence and his own greed. I lost myself, Mom, he explained during one of our sessions. Somewhere between wanting to impress Sophia and feeling inadequate next to her family's wealth, I forgot who I was and what Dad taught me about integrity. Your father would have been so disappointed, I said, not to wound him, but because honesty was necessary for healing. I know, Bradley acknowledged, tears in his eyes. That is the hardest part, knowing how ashamed he would have been of me. Over time, our conversations became less about the betrayal and more about rebuilding something new between us. Not the unconditional mother-son relationship of before, but a more measured connection between two adults, one that acknowledged the harm done while leaving space for potential reconciliation. My relationship with Lily was another delicate negotiation. After Sophia filed for separation, she initially used my granddaughter as leverage, threatening to cut off all contact. But as her parents' legal troubles mounted and her carefully constructed social image crumbled, she became more amenable to compromise. We established a schedule where Bradley would bring Lily to visit me at the country house once a month. These visits were precious opportunities to build a relationship with my granddaughter, to tell her stories about her grandfather and the house he built to begin creating the summer memories I had always envisioned. One unexpected outcome of this difficult chapter was the community that formed around me. My neighbors who had witnessed the Blackwells' takeover attempt became fierce allies. My friend Elaine and her husband remained steadfast supporters. And through Margaret, I connected with other seniors who had experienced similar betrayals by family members. This last connection proved especially meaningful. I began attending a support group for elderly victims of financial abuse, finding solace in shared experiences and strength in collective recovery. Eventually, I started facilitating these meetings using my own story to help others recognize warning signs and protect themselves. Financial abuse of seniors is not just about money, I would tell the group. It is about dignity, autonomy, and respect. We have earned the right to decide our own futures. This advocacy work gave me purpose beyond my personal healing. I collaborated with Margaret's firm to develop educational materials for seniors about protecting their assets and recognizing exploitation. I spoke at community centers and retirement homes, sharing my experience without shame or self-pity. If it could happen to me, I would tell my audiences it could happen to anyone. Love does not guarantee loyalty, and family ties do not ensure protection. As part of my own protection, I worked with Margaret to establish ironclad legal safeguards for my property and assets. We created a proper estate plan with a legitimate power of attorney granted to Elaine rather than Bradley, clear provisions for the eventual inheritance of the house, and stipulations about maintaining Frank's craftsmanship. Throughout this process of rebuilding and advocacy, I found myself reflecting often on what Frank would think of all that had happened. One evening, sitting on our porch watching the sunset over the lake, I felt his presence more strongly than I had since his passing. "I think you would be proud of me, Frank," I said aloud to the golden sky, not for the outcome but for finding the strength to fight for what matters. The wind rustled through the trees in what I chose to take as agreement. My relationship with Bradley remained complicated. After his separation from Sophia became a divorce, he seemed to accelerate his journey of self-reflection and redemption. He moved from Boston to a small apartment in the nearby town, took a job at a local financial advisory firm, focusing on ethical investing, and committed himself to being a present father to Lily during his custody time. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, he asked if we could meet at the country house. It was the first time I had invited him onto the property since the confrontation. "I have something I want to show you," he said, carrying a large flat package wrapped in brown paper. We sat at the kitchen table, the same maple surface his father had crafted decades earlier, as he carefully unwrapped his offering. It was a shadow box frame, containing Frank's original hand-drawn plans for the house, which I had thought were lost during the Blackwells' occupation. "I found these in a folder Sophia's father had taken," Bradley explained. "I thought you should have them back." I ran my fingers over Frank's precise pencil lines, his neat architectural notations, the dream that became our reality. "Thank you," I said simply. "This means a great deal to me." "There is something else," Bradley continued, his voice hesitant. "I have been taking woodworking classes. I thought maybe if you would allow it, I could learn to maintain some of Dad's work around the house. Not to change anything, just to preserve it properly." The offer touched me deeply. It was not a grand gesture, but a humble one, an acknowledgement of the value of what his father had created, and a step toward making amends in a meaningful way. "I think your father would like that," I replied, "and so would I." As I approach my 70th birthday, I look back on the past 2 years with mixed emotions. The betrayal by my son and his wife's family remains a painful chapter in my life story. Yet the strength I discovered in myself, the community that rallied around me, and the purpose I found in helping others have all been unexpected gifts born from adversity. I do not know what the future holds for my relationship with Bradley. Trust rebuilds slowly, brick by brick, through consistent actions rather than promises. But I have seen genuine change in him, a reclaiming of the values Frank and I tried to instill, and that gives me hope. What I do know with certainty is that this house, this home that contains so much of Frank's love and craftsmanship, will remain protected. It stands as testimony to what matters most in life, not market value or status, but the authentic expression of love made tangible through dedicated work. If there is a lesson in my story for others, perhaps it is this: our worth is not determined by what we own, but by the integrity with which we live. Property can be taken, but dignity and self-respect are ours, to surrender or defend. And sometimes the quietest act of resistance, a simple nod and smile in the face of injustice, can be the beginning of reclaiming our power. Have you ever had to stand up against someone you love to protect what is rightfully yours? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if my experience resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and recovery, and share with anyone who might need encouragement to protect themselves from exploitation, even when it comes from family. Thank you for listening, and remember, it is never too late to reclaim your power and your peace.